They laughed the moment she stepped off the truck. Scarred, quiet, too old, they said, too fragile, too something. Private Luke Hendricks couldn't resist. Well, look what the storm dragged in, he sneered, loud enough for the entire unit to hear. You sure you're in the right place, lady? Bingo night's that way. The woman said nothing. She just stared at the horizon, eyes calm, arms at her sides. Her name tag read Keller first name Grace. No one knew where she came from. No one cared. To them, she was just another bureaucratic experimenton, older female sergeant reassigned to a frontline training base. One of those diversity hires. At least, that's what they assume. Yo, check the scars on her arms, Luke added, louder this time, that from combator a bad fall in Zumba class. Laughter erupted, crude, mocking, immature. Recruits nudged one another. Some looked away, uncomfortable, but none stepped in. Not yet. Grace Keller didn't flinch. She stood at parade rest, back straight, eyes forward. Not a single muscle twitched. That silence? It was mistaken for weakness. It was a fatal mistake. Luke wasn't done. Hey, Sergeant Thou, many push-ups before your hip gives out? He said, pulling out his phone and pointing it at her face. Come on, smile. This is going to be great on TikTok. Grace didn't blink, but something about the air shifted like the moment before a thunderstorm. A quiet wait. Then a voice boomed from the edge of the field. That'll do, Private Hendricks. It was Sergeant Barker, the training lead. Stocky, gravel-voiced, not one for sugarcoating anything. He wasn't smiling. You think this is funny? Barker snapped. You just volunteered for double duty and Sergeant Keller will be overseeing your obstacle training this week. The laughter stopped. Luke's face froze for a moment, caught between a smirk and uncertainty. Wait, Sergeant? Barker nodded. You got wax in your ears, Private? That's Sergeant First Class Keller. Murmurs spread across the field like wildfire. No way! She's one of them? Where'd she come from? No answer. Just Grace walking toward the coarse clipboard in hand, boots crunching on gravel with slow, steady precision. Her leg dragged just slightly like she carried an old wound. But every movement was precise, deliberate, measured. Luke scoffed. She probably can't even clear the first wall. Wanna bet? Someone muttered nearby. The obstacle course was no joke. 12 elements designed to grind down the strongest recruits' rope climbs, crawl trenches, wall vaults, tire runs, overhead bars, and a mile sprint with gear. Normally, instructors just observed, but not Grace. Without a word, she dropped her clipboard, adjusted the straps on her vest, and stepped up to the starting line. No announcement, no bravado. Then, she moved, and everything changed. The first rope, she scaled it like she'd been born with calloused hands. The walls, vaulted cleanly, not a second of hesitation. Her form, flawless, fluid. The kind of efficiency that doesn't come from gym sessions but from real-world combat, from experience. By the fourth obstacle, even Luke had lowered his phone. By the sixth, the squad stood in stunned silence, watching as she slid under barbed wire with military precision, mud streaking her scarred arms like war paint. By the end, she finished the mile sprint gear, and all without a single grunt of pain. She crossed the final marker, straightened her posture, picked up her clipboard, and said calmly, back to formation. No boast, no glare, just discipline. Silence swallowed the field. Recruits glanced at each other, unsure of what they'd just seen. The woman they mocked? She just crushed the most brutal course on base, without saying a single word. And then someone whispered it. A nickname. A legend. Widow 27. Luke turned, confused. What the hell is Widow 27? No one answered, but the older drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Kaliaman, who had served 3 tours, had gone completely still. He was staring at Grace like he'd seen a ghost. Later that day, in the barracks, whispers began to circulate. Stories, old ones, about a mission that went dark in the mountains of Kandahar. 7 went in, 1 came out. Carried 2 dying teammates on her back for miles, radioed extraction from memory, never spoke about it again, but one name kept surfacing in the retellings. Widow 27. And now, she was standing right in front of them. In dusty boots with scars they had laughed at, and silence that spoke louder than any rank ever could. But none of them were ready for what would happen the next morning when the general arrived. And the entire base would be forced to face the truth about the woman they mocked. The next morning, The mood at Fort Rayner had shifted, though few would admit it. Grace Keller walked onto the training field just before dawn, same worn boots, same faded fatigues. The early light caught the scars on her forearms, thin lines and twisted tissue that had once drawn jeers. Now, they drew silence. No one said a word when she passed. No more jokes, no more cameras. Luke Hendricks, normally the loudest voice in Bravo Platoon, kept his eyes fixed on his boots. His swagger had thinned overnight, and yet something inside him still refused to surrender. Pretty or fear maybe both. Grace called the platoon into formation with a clipped, precise tone. Obstacle course. Again. Pair work. You'll rotate every 10 minutes. Someone mumbled, 2 days in a row? Grace didn't respond. She didn't need to. The squad broke off in pairs. Luke was assigned to run with a younger private, someone too nervous to question his authority, but his eyes kept darting back to her. Every time she moved, there was something off about it. Not wrong, not weak, just practiced. She didn't walk like a trainer. She walked like someone who'd memorized a battlefield. Her gait was uneven but confident, like she'd calculated every inch of terrain before her boot touched it. During the warm-up drills, she demonstrated a breach maneuver across the trench pit. Her movements were mechanical, efficient, not fast but flawless. Luke scoffed. She probably just rehearsed that one move. Staff Sergeant Cole overheard and glanced sideways. Funny, that move's standard protocol from Ranger recon units. I haven't seen it since Afghanistan. Luke blinked. She's Ranger trained? Cole didn't answer. The day went on. Grace said little. She corrected a few stances, adjusted a rifle grip, nothing dramatic. But recruits began noticing something odd. Everything she corrected was right. Everything. Even Barker Gruff. Unimpressed, Barker paused when he saw her instruct a malfunction drill that most had only ever read in manuals. Grace walked a recruit through the entire sequence, step by step, using nothing but hand signals. She's not teaching, one private whispered. She's retraining muscle memory. By midday, the doubts started to de-and. Something stranger took root. Respect. Unspoken, uneasy, but real. Even Luke couldn't ignore it. During the lunch break, he lingered behind the others, watching her from across the field. She sat alone, as she always did, eating slowly, methodically, no phone. No talk, no friends. But she wasn't lonely. She looked content. She didn't need company. That unsettled him more than anything. He tried again the next day. During a gear inspection, he accidentally kicked over her rucksack, spilling the contents onto the gravel. Mud clung to the spare uniform folded inside. A few of the guys snickered out of habit, not malice. Grace knelt, collected each item calmly. No anger, no protest. Just silence. But Luke couldn't leave it alone. Later, during the sprint drills, he bumped into her mid-run, knocking her into the dirt. "Sorry, Sergeant," he said with fake innocence. "Didn't see you there." She stood up without a word, brushed off the gravel, jogged back into formation. That was the moment something snapped not in her, but around her. No one laughed. Not a single person. Even Barker stepped in this time. "You've got a death wish, Hendricks?" he barked. "Back of the line, now." Luke obeyed, but his glare lingered. Not just at Grace, at the others too. The same people who had laughed with him days ago were now quiet, even protective. Traitors, he thought. He didn't know it, but they weren't defending her out of pity. They were defending her because of something deeper. They were beginning to believe in her. And they weren't the only ones. That evening, Staff Sergeant Cole found Barker outside the mess hall, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You know who she is?" Cole asked quietly. "I've got suspicions," Barker muttered. "You?" Cole nodded once. "Ranger, Special Ops, call sign Widow 27. Barker's eyes narrowed. "That's not a call sign, that's a myth." "It's not," Cole said. "The mission in the Northern Ridge, 7 in, 1 out. She carried 2 of them through the mountains, alone, through snow, no air support." Barker exhaled, slow and quiet. "Jesus." They both looked across the yard. Grace sat alone at a table built for 6, the same way she always did. Quiet, scarred, forgotten. Except now, she wasn't forgotten anymore. Luke didn't hear that conversation, but he felt the shift. So he planned one last stunt. He told a few guys to bring their phones, said he'd finally break the old lady's silence, said he'd get the reaction he wanted and go viral for it. They didn't laugh this time, but some still showed up to watch, because they didn't know what was coming. No one did. But they were about to find out why silence was Grace Keller's greatest weapon, and why no one, not even a base full of loud, confident young soldiers, should ever laugh at scars they don't understand. The next morning, the Tennessee sky was choked with fog, the kind of heavy, still air that made your skin itch before anything even happened. Bravo platoon gathered around the training field, boots crunching nervously on gravel. Wordless tension hummed beneath their chatter. Luke Hendricks stood in the center of it all, phone already clipped to his chest harness, camera ready to roll. This was his moment. He had planned it all the night before, scripted, choreographed, cruel. A fake fitness challenge designed to push Sergeant Keller to her breaking point in front of the whole platoon, with multiple phones recording from different angles. "Let's see how far those scars carry you," he'd muttered as he set up the stations. Sprint, drill, high, crawl, dummy drag, live gear inspection. All designed to exhaust her. All designed to humiliate her. "Ready, Sergeant?" he asked now, voice full of mock encouragement, the kind that curdled in your stomach. Grace looked at the setup, looked at the crowd, then gave a single nod. And that was all. The course began. Grace Keller moved through the stations without a word. She didn't stumble, didn't complain. Her movements weren't flashy, they were precise, clean, controlled. But Luke kept raising the stakes. "Come on, Sergeant, smile for the camera," he shouted, keeping pace beside her. "Bet each one of those scars has a story, huh? Which one was from bingo night?" Some recruits winced, others turned away. The laughter wasn't coming anymore. Grace reached the final station, a 120-pound dummy drag across uneven terrain. Luke stepped in front of her. "One more thing," he said. "Let's talk about that nickname people keep whispering." She paused. Luke smirked. "That's right, Widow 27. Sounds made up, like something from a comic book. What, are you some kind of secret superhero?" Then he laughed loud, sharp, echoing. And that's when it happened. Boots approached, heavy, measured, commanding. The platoon instinctively straightened. From the side gate, a man emerged wearing a sharply pressed uniform and the kind of calm that made everyone tense. Major General Thomas Arden. Every recruit knew the name. Most had only ever seen him during base-wide assemblies or in official newsletters. But here he was, in the flesh, watching. He stopped at the edge of the training field, arms behind his back, eyes locked not on Luke, but on Grace. "Private Hendricks," the general said, his voice like iron wrapped in smoke. "Would you like to repeat that last comment?" Luke froze. "Sir, ear?" But Arden wasn't finished. "You said something about Widow 27? Now the field went completely silent. Even the birds seemed to stop mid-flight. "I didn't mean anything, sir," Luke stammered. "Just a joke." The general's eyes hardened. "Do you know what that name means, son?" Luke swallowed hard. Major General Arden turned his gaze to the rest of the platoon. "I'll tell you," he said, stepping forward, his boots thudding with purpose. 4 years ago, during a covert mountain operation code named Ghost Line, a 7-person recon team was sent behind enemy lines. 2 died in the ambush, 1 vanished. 3 were too wounded to walk, and 1... He pointed to Grace. 1 brought them back. Gasps echoed across the field. Someone dropped their phone. She carried 2 soldiers bleeding, unconscious in her shoulders across 12 miles of frozen terrain. No radio contact, no support, no food, 1 broken leg, ribs shattered. And she crawled the last 300 yards. Arden's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the air like a blade. "You mock her scars?" he said, eyes back on Luke. "Those scars are why 2 men are alive today. Those scars are why I approved her special reassignment, to train you, because what you just saw out here? That's discipline. That's survival. That is what a soldier looks like after giving everything." Luke looked like a man who had been dragged underwater. Her call sign, Arden finished, was Widow 27, because she buried 26 of her team across 3 deployments, and she was number 27, the one who lived, the one who came back. The silence that followed was deeper than any punishment could deliver. Some of the younger recruits were staring at Grace now, not with pity, not even with awe. With reverence, Luke slowly pulled off his phone rig and dropped it in the dirt. Grace didn't speak. She didn't have to. She just turned and walked past him, her expression steady, her posture proud. And for the first time since she arrived, soldiers stepped aside for her, not out of fear, but out of respect. No applause. No grand speech. Just quiet recognition of a truth that had always been there, carved into every bruise and scar. Grace Keller wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to remind them what sacrifice looked like. And Luke Hendricks, he had just humiliated himself, not her. For the rest of that day, the training field at Fort Rayner was quiet in a way it had never been before. No jokes, no whistles, no bets behind the barracks. The name Widow 27 now lived in every whispered breath, every shared glance. Even those who didn't know the full story understood enough to feel the shift. A myth had taken shape in front of them, and her name was Sergeant Grace Keller. She didn't celebrate her vindication. She didn't smirk or gloat. After Major General Arden's revelation, she returned to her routine like nothing had happened, cleaned her gear, sharpened her tools, ate dinner alone at her usual table in the mess hall, 6 seats, 1 tray. But that night, something changed. One by one, recruits began approaching. No big gestures, no apologies, just quiet footsteps and unspoken acknowledgement. A private sat across from her, then 2 more. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, one of them whispered, "Ma'am, is it true? The whole mission?" Grace didn't look up. She stirred her coffee, took a slow breath, and replied in the same steady voice she used during drills. "I don't tell war stories," she said. "I train soldiers so no one else has to carry that weight." No one asked again, because they understood. This woman didn't come back for medals. She came back so others wouldn't make the same mistakes, so they'd take training seriously, not just as routine, but as preparation for the worst day of their lives. And she knew how bad it could get. 3 days later, Luke Hendricks was gone. No ceremony, no farewell, just a silent transfer order stamped and expedited. His phone, one meant to capture her humiliation, was now evidence of his own. The video had made its rounds higher up. Quiet consequences, swift and permanent. In his absence, the mood of the unit changed. Respect replaced bravado. Focus replaced noise. And Grace? She remained the same. One morning, during a live fire exercise, a misfire caused panic among the recruits. One soldier froze. Another dropped his rifle. Grace stepped in it with a shout, but with a whisper. "Reset. You've got cover. You're still in this." Her presence calmed the storm. Because when someone who survived real hell tells you you're going to be okay, you believe them. Her authority didn't come from volume. It came from having walked through fire and choosing to return to walk others through it too. That night, back in the barracks, someone finally asked the question out loud. "Why the number 27? Grace paused. She didn't look away, didn't deflect. "Because I buried 26. The room fell silent. Not awkward silence, but the kind that happens in churches, or cemeteries, or beside the bed of someone who's seen too much. She continued softly. "They were my team, my responsibility, and I carry their names with me, always." No one asked for the names. They didn't have to, because they understood the weight behind every step she took, every scar she bore, every breath she chose to still take. And in that understanding, they began to change. She had trained them to fight, but she had also taught them something more powerful: dignity in silence, strength without show, leadership without ego. Weeks passed, drills intensified, new recruits came and went. But the story of Widow 27 remained. And so did the lesson. She never once gave a motivational speech, never needed to raise her voice, never demanded respect. She earned it every day, every scar, every silent mile. And when her final training rotation ended, she didn't say goodbye. She simply packed her bag, folded her uniform, and walked toward the truck that would take her to her next assignment. No applause, no ceremony. But as she passed the platoon one last time, every single recruit stood at attention. Not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Because they had learned something few people ever do. Real heroes don't wear capes. They carry names, and scars, and silence. Grace Keller never asked to be remembered, but they would never forget her. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. And she reminded all of us that the loudest one in the room is rarely the strongest. Sometimes, greatness walks quietly and lets the truth speak through the scars.